Yeah, so we mentioned a bit earlier that listing numbers have been holding really low, and this has been one of the factors adding to this urgency in the market and the upwards pressure on housing prices. And listing numbers are still really low. Total listing numbers are still tracking well below average, but we're now starting to see vendor confidence lifting enough that we're starting to see new listing numbers, so fresh stock being added to the market, is now tracking around 17% above the 5-year average, well above levels from a year ago, which of course is when we're moving into a lockdown. So the year-on-year comparisons for listing numbers are becoming much less relevant. As we see new listing numbers rising, we're still seeing total listing numbers holding quite low. But there is a chance that buyer activity is probably just starting to wind down a little bit. If I'm right about that, then we'll probably start to see total listing numbers or the rate of absorption just slowing down enough that total listing numbers just start to lift off their super low levels. And that will help to just even up the balance between sellers and buyers, add a little bit more leverage to a buyer's ability to negotiate, maybe a little bit more time in their purchasing decision as well, which again, I think is a very healthy outcome because things have been way too far skewed towards the seller rather than the buyer. So there's two different ways to measure supply. One is what we just talked about and how much advertised inventory is out there. The other way of measuring supply is how many new homes are being built. We know that the Home Builder Grant has been hugely successful. It's resulted in an absolute surge in house approvals, not for unit approvals. Units seem to not really generally suit the eligibility criteria for home builder, but house approvals are now at record highs. And the December quarter commencements data really started to show that a lot of these approvals are now converting to starts, which of course for a house has a much shorter time frame to end up in a completion. Typically a big unit project could be, year and a half to even 2.5 years or so between commencing and completing. Houses generally have a much shorter turnaround time for obvious reasons. So we are expecting there's going to be this ongoing push towards more new supply coming into the marketplace at a time when population growth has turned negative as well. So the supply side really rising very quickly for newly built supply. The demand side derived from overseas migration, at least, still quite low. So again, I think this is a very positive outcome. We know that the residential construction sector is very important for the economy. We've always argued there needs to be more new supply being built in the market, and it's great to see more of that low density supply coming in, whereas previous upswings in the housing residential or the residential construction sector have been dominated by high-rise types of development. So quite a change of the guard now, where we're seeing more lower density styles of development, and high density styles of development still remain very low due to very low demand for that type of stock, particularly the fact that rental markets are quite weak in those inner city apartment precincts as well. So population into Australia, or overall population growth in Australia, turned negative through the September quarter for the first time since 1916, really highlighting how important overseas migration is to overall population growth. So there's been a lot of questions since COVID became a thing and international borders closed about, well, how come population growth has pretty much stalled, but housing markets are surging forward? So it's pretty important to remind all your listeners that 70% of Australia's population growth are temporary migrants. So there are people like visitors or students that don't have permanent residence here in Australia. And that 30% that are permanent would generally rent first and then progressively buy as they figure out where they want to live and how much they can spend and where they have a job, that type of thing. So the longer closed borders remain, progressively, the more that's going to be impactful on actual buying demand. It's probably another explanation as to why we've seen such an immediate impact on those inner city apartment markets, which have generally been the main sort of overseas migrants have been one of the main tenancy sources for a lot of those inner city apartment precincts. How long is this going to persist? Well, I guess that's a question for the federal government. When will we open up international borders and start to allow foreign students back in? That's going to be the main game here, not just to shore up our universities, which, there's a lot of discussion around whether or not our universities should be as reliant as what they are on foreign students. That's the topic for someone else. But absolutely, if we do start to see foreign students coming back, that should help to shore up our tenancies in those inner city apartment precincts. and also re-establish that trend of those permanent migrants who'll be looking to actually purchase or build a home in Australia. But that seems to be some way off at the moment.